Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff, your host of the podcast, where we talk about all things HR, talent, HR tech, world of work, and we always have guests on our show, and they're usually HR practitioners, leaders, HR tech experts, recruiters, all from North America primarily. The episodes are dropped every Thursday morning and may live on our website at GoScaleHR.com or on our YouTube channel. So the channel is growing, which is good. So hit the subscribe button so that you get notified of new episodes being dropped, and also share comments. I mean, it's really about sort of engaging and sharing ideas. And so the idea here is to learn something new and to really talk about what's top of mind right now. And so we have a fantastic episode today, and we called it Game-Changing Candidate Experience, the Power of Small Action. So obviously, candidate experience has been something that we've been talking about for a long time. And our guest, I'm going to bring her on in a minute. Marlies Farrill is an expert in all things talent and HR. So based in Toronto, and she'll help us break it all down. But I just want to make just a couple of starting points first. I've said many times before that our business climate is very complex. It's fast moving, and things are always changing, and it seems like every day. And so we've been grappling with this notion of the candidate experience for years now. But I think it's safe to say that it's never been more important than now. And I think what's happened is that work and jobs have become hyper specialized, right? And so obviously technology has a big role in that, which has been so heavily influencing everything that we do, and then personalizing experiences for customers, whether it's purchasing a new product or service or finding a job. I mean, it's really about making sure that the experience of the customer is top notch, and those organizations who can offer that win the competitive edge every time. And so I think also just my last point I want to make about on the candidate side is that candidates are most frustrated more so now than ever, it seems like, and it's due to a lack of available job, which is really strange because we have a shortage of skilled people, yet we have a shortage of jobs. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, catch-22. But we are seeing more qualified applications, now than ever before, and candidates are also less reluctant to share negative experiences online, which has the ability, to impact how the candidates see the employer brand. And so obviously the old school tools are, Glassdoor, which I don't love. I don't like Glassdoor, but it is relevant. Obviously social media, TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat, other platforms where people are just openly sharing their experiences. This would never happen 30 years ago. It was not even possible. It's more important for an organization to really think about candidate experience and stop talking about it, and it starts online. And I think, so I've made some really sort of interesting points, but I'm here to sort of talk to our guest, Marlies Farrill, who's going to break it all down. So Marlies, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. Really excited to chat today, Jeff.
Fantastic. And so before we go into our topic, can you just tell the audience, us sort of what you do? What's
Sure.
your background? What do you do? Like, what's your claim to fame?
Yeah, so I really consider myself a generalist. I've really been in all sorts of HR roles. So whether on the talent side or the HR space, I really consider myself like a people professional. So I really love building great companies. And that includes building the team, but then also making it a great place to work for those people, because you can spend all this time getting great talent in the door, but if you don't make it a good place to work, they're not going to stay. So I really consider myself kind of a jack of all trades. Some people are specialists, and I'm very proud to be a generalist, and I enjoy being one.
Fantastic. So I'm very much like you, a generalist. I've always been a generalist. I mean, I think your angle is probably a little bit different than mine, but that's totally cool. The one other thing that I just heard from the grapevine, that you just got your MBA.
Yes, I just got my MBA, and I think, all HR professionals, whether or not they have a formal education, really have to be business professionals first. That's how we gain the trust of the business. And you can do that. I did it. I got my education, but even before I did, I think always making sure that you take the time to really understand the businesses you're in is going to be really key to gaining trust as an HR professional. Not only actually with your employer, the place you work, but also with candidates. If they know that you know your stuff, whether you're interested in their space, even if you've never worked in their space, that gains you credibility, which is going to help you build trust.
I just love that. I totally agree with the business function comment. I've been making that comment for about 25 years now. So I think it's definitely true. I mean HR in general is a business function, and they're being asked to support organization from all four corners. So if they don't know business, then what are they doing, right? So I totally agree with that. Okay, so let's get into our topic here. So candidate experience, and I guess my first question is, how do you define candidate experience, and why is it important in the job market today?
Yeah, I think candidate experience is essentially the sum of the interactions and the impression anybody interacting with you for job searching purposes has. And so that's the small interactions. That's how they interact with your brand. But that's also how they interact with the people in your organization. And, through our function, we often think of like how they interact with HR, but it's also how they interact with anybody who works for your brand. And it's basically that impression that they walk away from the experience of your company. So the reason that's really important is we all want really talented people, and very talented people will always have choice for where they work. The way that we treat people will impact our ability to acquire really good talent. And, sometimes people think, oh, if they're top talent, they'll have a different impression. You never know what else they hear along the way. Maybe they heard about, maybe they're applying for a VP role, but they heard of somebody who had a bad experience in applying for even like an internship role. They might not engage with your brand because of a bad experience somebody else has had. So it impacts your brand from that perspective, like whether or not they'll engage. But also, if you have a consumer company, it actually could impact whether or not they choose to be a consumer of your company. If you have like a consumer product, they've shown that people have bad candidate experiences, for example, with telecom companies, will probably change to another provider. So it could impact their ability to engage with your brand, but could also impact your bottom line from that person not choosing to be a customer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think it's excellent answer. I think it's also complicated. It's not like one thing that can do everything. I think it's a multifaceted challenge, and I think organizations need to understand that. It's not spending money on Glassdoor or building a great career site, or engaging in a social media campaign. It's basically everything that you do from start to finish. So and I think it's even more important in a tough job market to separate the contenders from the pretenders. So what are some of the common mistakes that you see companies making that negatively impact candidate experience?
Yeah, so I think in a perfect world, all organizations would have the budget for all this amazing technology and these amazingly big teams. But the reality is like HR and recruiting teams, unfortunately, have been one of the hardest impacted functions through these economic changes. So we're often dealing with leaner teams than ever before. So that's why, some of the common mistakes, I think, taking a step back, is cutting your team too lean. Because I understand HR teams don't always initially bring in income, but I think that's a huge mistake because these small interactions matter. But going to maybe more practical things is a lot of organizations don't even do some of the basics. And maybe it's because they don't think they're important. I think there's small things that are big mistakes that technology can really help us with. So for example, even things like an auto receipt email, when you apply to a job, that should be there. And it should actually tell candidates exactly what to expect in your process. A huge mistake I see on a similar line is people don't even take this time to do these auto rejections. I think there's things that take a lot more investment. But there's a lot of things that any applicant tracking system can really help you with that are small things that can really impact the experience. So I think another mistake companies make is they overpromise. If you have a very lean team, don't be promising, well, you'll get back to people in 24 hours. Be realistic. Say, hey, you'll hear from us in the next month. That's maybe not the experience we want to deliver, but I think you have to look at your data, the size of your team, the size of your applications, and say, what can we realistically offer? Because if you can provide a predictable experience, even if it's not the white glove experience you'd love to deliver, candidates will appreciate the respect you're providing them with and at least won't feel like misled by you.
Yeah, those are excellent ones. I mean, obviously, I've been on that side of the table where I've been searching for a job, many years ago, so prior to starting my own business. And the one thing that I always notice is that companies always painted a very rosy picture of what it's like to work there. And I know it's bullshit because, nothing's perfect in life. And it almost seems disingenuous. So they're trying to sell me on something that isn't actually true. Yeah, what's your opinion of that? I mean, I think that happens more than we think.
I think
I think
actually
there is some weight there, on that.
for sure. I think actually my favorite talent brands tell who should apply and who shouldn't apply. And actually I've started seeing this trend in even job descriptions, which I really appreciate, which is like why you should work here, but also who might not like it here. And I think actually, if your talent brand is doing its job and you're painting yourself accurately, people should be opting out greater than who's opting in, because that's actually a success as well. If you tell people who wouldn't like it here in a realistic way and why they wouldn't like it. But I agree. I think a good job description or a good brand should tell people these are the types of people who will enjoy working here, and this is who won't. And I actually think we need more of that, because then it also saves like an HR team's time, because less people will apply who have actually taken the time to understand why it's a bad brand. But yeah, I agree. If your talent brand is saying everything's perfect about this company, you're going to be bringing in the wrong types of people who also won't stay. So that's bad for the candidate and the employee experience. You're going to have a lot of people working there who aren't happy.
Yeah. Obviously, one of the things that has happened in the last decade or more is the explosion of technology that really helps hiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we call it applicant tracking systems, recruitment CRM, social sourcing tools, and on and on. And they're all meant to, I think, do a couple of things. One is to help with the automation, help with making things easier to sort of administer, boost candidate experience, and so on and so on. Now, the challenge is, when you're trying to provide a personalized experience, yet you've gone too far on the pendulum in terms of focusing too much on the standardization and the efficiency of process at the expense of experience. So how do you balance those two things? I mean, obviously, someone like myself, for example, who's hard of hearing, if I'm engaged in a process and I'm unable to actually hear the person, whether it's through a virtual video tool, for that matter, but the company wants to stick to their standardized sort of process, that's a problem, right? So how do you balance those?
Yeah, I'll maybe answer your general question, then this kind of the second offshoot of that. So I think personalization should increase as you go through the process. So I think at the application stage, one of the amazing things about technology is for example, auto reject functions, at the very application stage. I think that's okay. I don't think there's going to be a huge ability to personalize at that stage. And I think that's okay as long as everybody hears back from you and hears about the status of their application. I do think as candidates invest more time, for example, they've spoken to a team member or something like that, personalization should increase. And so, for example, maybe for a sales role, you have 10 very common rejection reasons. You can have a template for each of those. For example, lack of experience, something like that. And you could delegate and use those different templates. Now, when it comes to later stages, I do think that's when we really need more personalization. Yeah. Maybe you have a template, but you edit it heavily, with a space to put in specific feedback. or a space to offer a call if they've done something as long as a case study. Now, I do think, going to another topic, when we deal with things like accessibility, I think right now there's no great technology that's doing that very well. And I do think that's when we need the people in the room to step in. So I think disability inclusion is something, Jeff, you and I are both very passionate about. And I used to work at a nonprofit in the early days that used a video tool, like the automated video interview. The problem was if the candidate didn't speak, so for example, the candidate needed to type their answers, the tool could not record. So obviously we had to find like other ways to interview those candidates, and you can't rely on technology in those, or at least at the time you couldn't. So I think if you're going to rely on any sort of technology, there needs to be an alternate pathway for people, for whatever reason, who cannot participate in that process. But I still think you should measure the same thing. So I do think personalization should increase as the process goes. And then, of course, in any accessibility reason, you need to find out what sort of accommodation those people need, and then go back to what were we trying to assess through this medium. But I think that's why I'm not a big fan of tools like the automated video interviews. I do think there's amazing things technology can do. Like, I agree, like the sourcing tools, for example, like applicant tracking softwares are a huge relief in terms of providing templates, allowing us to not lose track of things and to provide those reminders, because the average recruiter has a huge workload. So I think technology can enable, but ultimately the person needs to be in the driving seat, and then we need an alternative for accessibility situations.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that was really solid. I mean, I think, absolutely. So we talked about small actions. So what are some of the maybe one or two of the most effective, I guess, small actions that people can take that make a huge difference?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite ones, which many years ago I saw an email, I believe from Ecobee, and I have copied this idea many years going through, is to provide a really detailed applicant received email. And that not only it relieves the anxiety, the candidate knows it's there, but in that email, tell people about the whole interview process. And you can change this if you have different ones for different ones. Your ATS will allow you to do that. Tell them what the steps are going to be, how long till the team hears from them, how you'll interact with them, and, bonus, if, who they should contact if there's any accessibility needs. Put that all in that initial email. And it doesn't need to come from a person. It can come from like a no reply. But I think that's a small step that by telling candidates what to expect, you're really going to take out some of that anxiety. I think the other thing that is very easy to, well, it sounds very easy to do, but so many companies don't do, is just do what you say you'll do. And if you tell people you'll get back to them in 10 days, business days, your team better be able to meet that. Or if you can't meet that, you better send an email and say, hey, we're falling behind. But I think if you follow that rule of like keeping your word, no matter how good an experience you can provide, if you keep your word, you're going to earn so much candidate respect, and people won't feel let down. Sounds so easy, but so many companies don't do it.
Yeah, and I think it really boils down to what communication. I mean, I think that's like for anything. I mean, I'm working with a client right now on just something totally different, but it's about it really boils down to communication or some lack thereof. And people, humans tend to fill in the gaps of communication, right? So they start to depending on the person, they may try to fill in the gaps in their head with theories, right? And, whether they're sort of true or not. And I think that the best thing that you can do is really make sure that you're communicating and actually sharing information and to letting people know what's going on. So if listeners can take one thing away from this episode and so what you've talked about, what is that one thing to actually improve the candidate experience?
I think it's make sure you close the loop with all candidates. And how you do that should change as the process engages. So at the beginning of the stage, it should be simple, should be automated, just because that's what a team can realistically do. I know candidates would love early feedback, but unfortunately, that just may not be realistic. And the more they engage in the process, the more the recruiter or HR team should provide. By the end, I think a very simple thing that very few companies will do is offer actual feedback. But if you offer candidates legitimate feedback, they might not be the right person for your role today. But I've had engineering candidates, for example, we told them they didn't have skills in an area and they came back in a year and they brushed up on those skills and they got the job.
Yeah.
So people who are invested in your company then have an opportunity to upskill if you're honest with them. And people want to get better. And I think that's one of the things really missing in the market. So I would say communicate with all your candidates and increase that personalization as it goes. And if you can, provide that real, honest feedback. It's hard to do, but luckily, most HR and recruiting professionals are smart and good with people and can probably do that in a tactful way. And as long as you're not doing it for like a legitimate, like if you're rejecting people for legitimate reasons, you should be able to provide them feedback, as it gets to the end of the process.
And I just want to point out something here is that if you are going to offer feedback, follow through on it. And the second thing is when you're giving feedback, make it constructive, because simply saying, you were great, but we had a candidate that better fit for, the role. That means nothing to a candidate, okay, who didn't get chosen for the job. So make sure that you have something tangible that the candidate can actually latch onto and to learn from, that they can do better next time. I mean, to me, I think it's a cop-out, actually, when people give feedback and they say, well, you were fantastic. We had a lot of strong candidates, but the one that we selected was better suited for the job. You've just, you've done nothing there, right? So you can say that, but then follow up with something, maybe some really, specific feedback. So that's my, that's hard to do. And doing the hard thing, build trust and credibility. So, I do have a last question for you.
Sure.
Because I want to throw in something about that technology here. AI-powered generative AI chatbot. What do you think about those as to help the candidate experience? Because there are companies out there that are now, deploying chatbots. So candidates can actually go to a chatbot and actually ask about where things are in the process. It fills in the black hole. It offers a whole sort of array of other sort of experience generating features. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think if somebody's supervising the AI, I don't think it could hurt. But I think if your team is managing this process effectively, it's not necessarily going to be necessary. So for example, in that email that you send at first, if it says, you'll hear from us in X days, the candidate should know where they stand throughout the process, ideally. But I don't think it hurts. I think as long as there's a person supervising it, because right now AI is just not super accurate yet, improving day by day. So I would say, I think also I've seen uses of AI where they can ask basic questions like, oh, will this be hybrid or on site? And if your bot can do things like that, I think that could be helpful. But hopefully you're already providing that information on a clear career site or things like that. So I would say it doesn't hurt. But I would say if your talent team or HR team is kind of doing the basics and making things clear up front, it might not be that necessary if you're on top of the experience. But I think AI can't hurt. That would kind of be my answer. What do you think?
I agree with you. Because what you're trying to do is, talent is so diverse. So I always believe that having a diverse offering where people can interact, differently. So I'm a huge, believer in chat. I mean, when I go to customer support, for example, on my phone at banks and all that kind of stuff, the thought of having to pick up the phone and call someone just makes me cringe. Because then I have to sit there for an hour on hold and, I can't even hear them anyways, because of my hearing loss. But anyway, so I definitely think that if you're able to train it and to, based on your, preferred answers and data points and knowledge, then I think it can be a very powerful tool. And I think it also allows you as the HR talent team to generate data. That's what people are asking for, what they're looking at, all that kind of stuff, which I think can be really powerful. And I'm thinking about, obviously, smaller organizations that don't have the huge team, have to sort of scale their operation somehow. And I think AI is definitely, even though there are concerns out there about privacy, compliance, security and bias and all that, there are a gazillion positives that I think outweigh some of those negatives. So I think it's a huge game changer, and I think it'll be, and I'm looking to, forward to seeing it being, to use more, for that use case.
I think as this more powerful and trainable these tools become, the more we're going to see them. I think right now they're a little error prone, but they're getting much better every single day. So
for sure.
It's the future for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Marlies, I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate your insights. I'm a huge fan of yours and following you in your career. And so, for all of you watching today, don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Share comments. I'd like to hear what you think. I mean, this is about sort of sharing knowledge and sort of challenging each other. And also the Unmuted podcast is all about HR tech, talent, recruiting, world of work, diversity, equity, inclusion, and so on. And so all of our guests are amazing people in HR, talent, HR tech. So Marlies, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Audio Jungle.